Good evening, I'm Joe Ginger. Welcome to Silver Gloves in Fulton County and the United States. Frank Hess tells of his experience with silver gloves. Frank and his wife Joann have spent their adult lives working with silver gloves and young boxers. Frank has always stayed in the background, but I asked him to share his experience he has had with silver gloves. I am proud to say we have been friends since 1975. I had the pleasure of being a boxing judge for him in those early years. I hope you enjoy the tape. Thank you.
The sport of boxing has a long and storied history in Fulton County and the Fulton County area and region. We're fortunate today to have with us Frank Hess, who I guess we could say is the guru of boxing in Fulton County, and Frank has been involved with it for decades and decades. And Frank, let's talk about how you got going in boxing. You started out at the Canton YMCA back in 1952 as a 17-year-old or thereabouts, correct?
About 1952 or 53, yeah. And I was just a kid. But Canton had a boxing team, and I heard about it. And I said, well, I'd like to get on there, and I got word that they'd accept me. And it was at the YMCA there across from where the medical building is when the old Y was there. So I started boxing there, and then they had rooms for rent, and so I moved in there. And it cost me $7, around $7 a week, but a couple dollars went toward the membership. And then when I moved in, well, some of the other boxers got rooms there too, and that's where I got started. It was Canton YMCA.
Was boxing fairly well established in Canton and Fulton County then, or was it just getting started?
It was fairly well established, but we just had little teams there, and around. Before I started, Johnny Leake, I think, was training boxers there. Gene Clark was training when I started. Gene went on to went on to the Boxing Hall of Fame in Illinois. Then he moved to California, and he got into the Softball Hall of Fame there in California. But he trained us the right way, and I'm glad I got started out that way, boxing right. He was a good trainer, and I was winning my bouts and living in, well, I started out in Bryant, but I was winning my bouts, and I was getting calls on weekends to go box, and I was going with my wife, Joann, and she was living on a farm, not many phones around, so I couldn't notify her that I wasn't going to be there to pick her up. That went on for 2 years, and when we got married, she said she made up her mind if she didn't get in boxing that it was going to be a one-way street. So we got married, and she went on and excelled in boxing and was over the state of Illinois in junior boxing, and eventually made the Boxing Hall of Fame. She's the only woman in there, and went in with Sugar Ray Leonard. He got a special award in Kansas City, and that was in 2000.
Well, tell us, you mentioned here in Canton at the YMCA you learned how to box right. Tell us what you mean by boxing right.
Okay, when I started, I had a lot of rough spots to work out, and I had a guy, one of the guys showing me how to break on the ropes and move a guy on the ropes and burn him on the ropes and that, and I didn't need to know that. It was just something that'd get me in trouble, and so got rid of him in a hurry. And then I got Larry Weaver, and Larry was a little bit younger than me, but he was a polished boxer, and he is one of the better boxers that ever come out of the area.
Well, then you went on to the military. You were a member of the 101st Airborne boxing team. Tell us about that.
When I got drafted into the military, and before I got out of training, I volunteered to go in the paratroopers, and it was pretty rough. They took about 80 of us out on a long run, and they run us, and they run us, and they kept running us until we was down to about 20. And then they held us up, and they said those are the guys I had to get rid of. And so I boxed one bout there, and by the time I got in the military, I was a welterweight champion from Illinois when I went in. And they told me how that the food was bad in the Army. Well, I was expecting that, but I never got a bad meal in there. And I was up to 186 pounds when I boxed my first bout. And they said, there's our heavyweight. So I went right directly to the boxing team. Some of them had to box off to get there. And in just a little while, I was down to middleweight. So I was the 101st middleweight. And that was one of the better boxing teams in the military.
Well, tell us about something that I don't know if it's rumor, if there's truth to it, but there was a general by the name of William Westmoreland who went on to command the U.S. troops in Vietnam, and he noticed you.
Westmoreland noticed me, and that's how I got noticed and sent to the boxing team. And then when I took my discharge to come home, they wanted me to stay there. They said, you'll stay in the gymnasium year-round. You won't go back. You won't have to go back to the company. Well, I took my physical, and I was sitting there, and I seen the command jeep when I went in the dispensary, and I sat there beside Westmoreland and talked to him. He was two-star general then, and he was taking his exam to go overseas.
So that's your connection to General Westmoreland?
Yeah, and then I marched in his parade when we had a parade for him before he left.
Mm-hmm. What's your best memory of the military boxing days?
Well, my best memories is being on the team, and I only lost one bout, and that was in there. I thought I had it won, but I didn't. I won all my bouts but one, and yeah, and it was good life. I had a 24-hour special pass. I could come drive on an off post anytime I wanted to. I could live off post. My wife was down there with me, and I had an apartment in Clarksville, Tennessee, and I had a bunk there with the boxing team. I'd go at 8 o'clock in the morning, work out in the gym, run 6 miles, and then I was off until dinner time, so I'd just stay at the barracks and lay on my bunk until it was time to 1 o'clock, and it was time to go back to the gym. And then 3 o'clock was off. I could either wait until 5 and eat supper or go on home. So it was all good. The military was, that was the best part of my life.
It sounded like you were treated pretty well in the military.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting. Once you got out of the military, then you continued to box, and one of the places you boxed was at Marigold Gardens in Chicago, which at the time, that was the Midwest haven of boxing and pro wrestling, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was Sammy and Danny Spunks run that. And I don't know how they heard about me, but they wanted me up there, and I fought a 3-rounder. And they said, we want you back next week. And then I fought like 5-rounders in. And I got the main event for 5 straight weeks. And yeah, they had my name on the marquee. It was hard for me to believe when I got there, but yeah, the Marigold Arena had wrestling on I don't know, during the week sometime, but they had boxing on Tuesday nights, and I'd get off work when I worked at Caterpillar. I'd check out an hour early, drive to Chicago, box, drive home, drive back to Caterpillar, pull in the parking lot about 3 o'clock in the morning, sleep until time to go to work, and go to work. And I'd done that for quite a while.
Yeah, you had a 30-year career at Caterpillar before retiring, and you mixed boxing in with that, using the example you just said.
Yeah, I went into Caterpillar as 17 years old, and in 1952, and I retired in 82, the day I had full retirement. It was in 1982 I retired.
And even though you retired from Caterpillar, boxing was still a full-time profession.
Yeah, I've never been out of boxing. Right now they're carrying me executive director of the Silver Gloves. For starting that, Frank Granados and I was both executive directors, and we chaired their meetings and that, and drove around, and we needed help. So the Davenport JCs come in and helped us, and they'd chair our meetings for us. And I got a phone call at home. They said, you've got to be in Tulsa, Oklahoma tomorrow at 1 o'clock. You're to go on the board meeting there. They had their big meeting, and I didn't have the money to buy the plane ticket, so I took the sidecar off my motorcycle and sold it for the plane ticket to go to Tulsa. Got there at 12:30, went on at 1 o'clock, and at 10 minutes after 1, we had everything we wanted. They said, we'll accept you, we'll give you library status, said everything the JC sends out, they'll have on there anybody that wants to start a Silver Glove program, they'll help them and tell them how to get it done.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll get into the Silver Gloves more here. That's a good foundation for it to see what happened. Tell us about, in 1964, you were the state middleweight Golden Gloves state champion.
1964, yeah.
You remember much about that, having that title?
Yeah, I was boxing in Louisville, Kentucky, and I was boxing there at the very same time. That was Cassius Clay's hometown, and he was Cassius Clay at the time before he went to Muhammad Ali, and he was boxing
Sonny
Liston in Miami, Florida, and I was boxing there in
Louisville,
the Freedom Hall, Louisville, Kentucky, at the same time. And I was looking for Olympic prospect, but when I lost out there in Louisville, well, that took me out of contention there.
Mm-hmm. But Freedom Hall in Louisville was a huge boxing back then, wasn't it?
It was a big civic center, yeah.
It had to be a thrill, boxing before that many people and that big and famous of an arena. A lot of things to remember there, aren't there? Do you remember much about the crowds when you were boxing? Did you feel the crowd feed off of them?
Yes, I could get that crowd up on their feet, go in there and start duking it out. I could get them on their feet, and I could set them down when I wanted to. But I would be in the dressing room wrapping my hands, and I'd have the other boxers be around me talking to me, and they'd, boy, I'm thinking all the time. I'm thinking all the time. I'm in there. I never said anything, but when I crawled through those ropes, my mind was open. I never thought about anything until the bell rang, and then I put her together. And you gotta, to win, you gotta do that. You can't, if you have to think, you're hit. It's too late. And I could watch those guys that was thinking, and if I just seen a right hand start to move, I could throw a right hand and hit them every time. And yeah, you have to have an open mind when you go in there. And I never had anything but boxing on my mind when I went in there, and I didn't have to think what I was going to do. I done it natural.
So you're not saying you didn't think at all, but you did most of your thinking about the bout before the bout.
Well, if you have to think, it's just like if a dog runs around out in front of your car. You don't think, hey, I'm going to pick up my foot off the foot feed and put it on the brake. It's got to come natural. And to win bouts, it's the way it has to be done.
Yeah. A lot of it's mental, isn't it?
Oh, yes.
It's interesting we say it's mental, but like you said, when you got in the ring, you weren't thinking.
Yeah.
You were boxing.
Yeah.
Did you ever think about going pro?
No, I didn't. I never encouraged it. That pro boxing is not that good, and I never talked it to the kids. And when I left to go to the military, I was training. The boys lost their trainer, so some of them went to California and turned pro. Jerry Walters from Marietta went out. He turned pro out there, and he wound up fighting 2 world champions, but he didn't. He fought under the name of Bob O'Hara, and he was from the Marietta and Bushnell area, and is waiting at the tavern to watch O'Hara fight. And when he stepped in the ring, they said, "That's not O'Hara, that's Jerry Walters." But he fought 2 world champions, and we had world champions that come in here as kids, and Michael Nunn was here about every time I set up the ring, and they went on to fight box pro, and most of the professionals out there today I've seen come up through silver gloves.
Interesting. Well, so the pro boxing was never an option. It was an option, but not one you wanted to take part in.
Living in the Fulton County area, there's no pro fighting in Delphirlade and that, and if I'd have turned pro, I'd maybe got 3 bouts a year, and $50 a bout to start with. Well, wherever I went, they'd give me like $30 gas money, and that's all I wanted was to box anyway. And
well, back in those early days, was there a lot of rivalry between the St. David boxers and the Canton boxers and the Dunfermline?
No, we all got along. And what happened when I started here in Canton, and we got it built up, I had to train the trainers and the bagmen, the ones that worked the ring. And when I got everything running smooth, I'd go to another town like Lewistown. And here in Fulton County, I had 2 teams in Lewistown, one in Cuba, one in St. David, one in Ellisville, one in Farmington. And yeah, I had enough boxing going on here that every Saturday I'd move the ring to another town where we had a team, and in order to get the boys experience, when you have like a dozen, 15 bouts, that's enough. But I'd run up there 45 bouts sometimes, just to get the kids the experience. And then Silver Gloves, the Nationals went the same way.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, you mentioned safety because the more I've read about your history in that, safety was always the number one concern with you in your training and working with the young kids.
That was it. And when Illinois started the safety program, they said Hess will chair it. Well, I had no medical background, and just as soon as they said that, the coaches said, "What are you going to do about steroids?" I didn't know anything about steroids, and said, I've never heard of it. They said, "Well, you better take a medical course." So I went to Spoon River and I took a paraprofessional course, and I'm still the safety chairman for boxing for Illinois.
Mm-hmm. So that was around what year?
Oh.
Early 80s? Late 70s? Late 70s?
No, it would be past the 80s. It was, it'd be late 80s probably.
That's what I'm thinking because you mentioned steroids, and that's when we first started hearing about it in boxing and other sports too.
Yeah.
So just trying to get a time frame in there on it. Something else in the Silver Gloves, we'll get into that. You saw a need for organized boxing amongst the younger kids. Golden Gloves was 15 and up. You were looking at Silver Gloves as being a boxing program for 8 to 15-year-olds.
8 through 15. We had no rules or regulations because there was no junior boxing under 16. So we had to make up our own scorecards, make up our own classes, and we had to make our own rules and regulations. And we must have done a pretty good job because about 4 years later, the Nationals seen what we had going. So they started Junior Olympics, and when they started, they had the whole United States where we had maybe 8 states. And so we held a meeting here in Fulton County and said, "Now, we got another junior boxing program."
And so did Junior Olympics and Silver Gloves eventually merge or anything, or they?
Was talking about merging, but everybody wanted to stay Silver Gloves, and we're bigger now than Junior Olympics, the national organization. It's one of the largest tournaments out there, and in order we had to break down into 8 regions with 6 to 8 states in each region. And for those boys to come into the national tournament, they have to win their state, beat the state champions in their region to come in. And we've been having over 300 boys come in. We set up 3 rooms in a ballroom. And the last tournament I had here, I had boys in Peoria shuttling back and forth for weigh-in, so we had to move it. So we centralized it in the Kansas City area. So California, New York, and all of them, it'd be fair for everybody. And we set up 3 rings in the ballroom, and we start registration on Wednesday, 2 sessions on Thursday, 2 on Friday, and all titled bouts on Saturday. And a year or 2 years ago, because of the epidemic, we didn't have last year's tournament, but we had 600 come in, and we was totally unprepared for it. But we've had Hawaii come in, we've had Alaska come in, and that's quite a expense to them because they have to win on the island, and then they have to take their winners and come into California and box the regional there and win there to come into the nationals in Kansas City. But the last tournament, big tournament, we had girls come in. Well, the girls sued us, and a girl out of Wisconsin, or one of the northern states up by Canada, and she won her suit, and we had to redo our bylaws and the rules and regulations for the girls to box, but they're boxing now, and we've had them on the national tournament.
Has to be pretty rewarding, I would think, for you to realize that something you started back in 1967 in Fulton County, Illinois, has become a national, and is Silver Gloves now international? Are there?
Oh, it's it's a big tournament now, but that's something we started. I was just training boxers, but if we hadn't had a lot of good guys like Joe Ginger and that come in there and work with us, I couldn't have done it by myself. It took everybody to get this through, and I was just training the boxers.
You've always said it takes just tons of volunteers to make this happen.
Oh yes, and they still volunteer. And they said it couldn't happen because we don't get paid. We every dollar that comes in goes to a scholarship fund for the boys that box Silver Gloves, and it's just not for college. They can go for job training, pipe fitting, electrician.
The trades.
Trade fit, yeah, they can go to trade school. They can put in for a scholarship. And
tell us about the ring. You and had once
Okay.
again a lot of volunteers help make a ring that you still have.
yeah, now what happened, the ring, I went down to Hitchcock's. He was down below Bryant, and I was looking the iron over to see if I could get enough iron to build a ring. And Dick asked me what I was wanting, and I didn't know, but he'd been a professional wrestler in his hard days, and he said, "Oh, this won't work." He ordered double strings steel for the ring, all new steel. I had the drawings for the ring. It was delivered to Spooner College, and the welding class built the ring, and that's how we got our ring built. But we didn't have a ring in the area. And it cost $500 to rent a ring. Well, after I got my ring, after we got the ring built, I wouldn't allow it to be rented. But if one of the teams was just starting, we'd take it over and set it up, and they could use it. And we still have the ring. Dick put it in my name when we had it, but we still have the Fulton County boxing ring.
And you've got it in the trailer somewhere. We won't ask
I
you
had
where.
it in a trailer, but right now the group's using it. It's in use, but it's not being rented. I wouldn't allow it to be rented.
Well, your group spent a lot of time, and I would guess became very proficient over the years at tearing that thing down, moving it somewhere, putting it in wherever you were boxing, tear it down that night, move it back, set it up again.
It was like a carnival concession. Yeah, a lot of bolts and nuts to put together.
Interesting. And you even had lumber yards, I understand, helping out with plywood
Yes,
for it, that sort of thing.
we needed a floor in there, so I went to the lumber yard, and the 4x10 sheets of flooring, they said, well, they'd furnish half of it, so I went to the other lumber yard and told them what I needed. I said, I don't expect you to do what the other one did. They said, what'd they do? And I said, they furnished half of it. Said, we'll take care of the other half. And on my ropes, when I was boxing at Marigold, we had it wasn't red, but it was like red ropes, so velvet ropes coverings. And we had a benefit boxing show for a little kid that needed surgery out east and could use the help. So we went down and had a benefit show. And in order to get those ropes covered, Mrs. Hitchcock, Dick Hitchcock's wife, worked all night making those boots to cover the rope. And we put up the ring, and that was our first use of the ring.
And that helped protect kids from getting rope burns and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I didn't believe in that anyway. A lot of that stuff would just get you in trouble, so I never taught it, and I never believed in it, and I was glad I was trained the same way.
Which goes back to that upbringing we talked about earlier in the program about doing things the right way.
Back when I first started, I got started off right.
Yep, the foundation was set.
Yeah.
So Alice Ingersoll Gym was used quite a bit for boxing tournament. Didn't you have national tournaments there several times throughout the 70s and 80s?
Well, we did. Those was mostly in Peoria and the larger cities, because the last one I had here, we didn't have the hotels, feeding facilities that we got today. But since Bill Cook come into the area, we're in pretty good shape here.
That's good. One other thing too, a lot of famous boxers have been here in this area. Camp Ellis, even though it wasn't Canton, it was still Fulton County. Joe Lewis boxed at Camp Ellis.
Three different times Lewis come in with his boxing team, and they had the world champions with him. Joe Lewis's name was Joe Louis Barrel, and he dropped the barrel and went with Joe Louis. He came in with Walker Smith. Walker Smith was Corporal Sugar Ray Robinson. Second time Walker Smith was Corporal Sugar Ray Robinson. He had world champions with him every time. And yeah, he boxed 3 different times in Fulton County at Camp Ellis. And Charlie Cutright from here in Canton was on that boxing team. And I didn't know Charlie was a boxer. He could have been a big help to me if I'd have known that. But I'd run a background check on him. And every tournament he went into, he was a master sergeant in the military. He won the tournament. So he was one of the better boxers during that time. Mm-hmm. And okay.
Interesting. I'll tell you, we're getting ready to wrap things up, but Frank, out of his archives, brought out this picture taken at Alice Ingersoll Gym. And what year did you think, or approximately, when this picture was taken, Frank?
Well, it would have been taken about, I would guess about 1970.
And I guess more than anything else, this picture shows you the number of volunteers.
Yeah.
And this was not everybody, obviously. But
No, this was just happened to be there when we took the picture, but it was all there to help.
Mm-hmm. One that you notice in particular, Mayor of Canton, Bob Jennings, right there.
Gail Schisler's in there. Bob Jennings is in there.
Gail Schisler.
Chief of Police Jim Elam was there to help me. And Dick Hitchcock, he was a silent partner. He called me when he'd hear I was taking kids out of state to box. I got to see you, and I'd go see what he wanted, and he'd give me money to feed him with. And he was always there to kick in money, but he never
wanted the publicity.
No, he never wanted any credit for it.
Well, that sounds like it describes you. You like to give other folks the credit, but I know you've been certainly a big part of boxing throughout your life. And Frank, we want to thank you for your service. When you think of a small small town area and rural area of West Central Illinois, and it develops into Silver Gloves boxing, and you had a big part of that. And that's just one aspect of the impact you had on people. So we thank you for your many decades of service.
I thank you for that, but I was just one person, and if it hadn't been for my wife and a lot of good help, we wouldn't have had a Silver Glove program that we have today.
Boxing in Fulton County, quite a history, and this gentleman, Frank Hess, has an awful lot to do with it. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you've enjoyed learning about a very interesting sport that has a lot of roots in Fulton County, Illinois.